What's up, guys? So before we get started, I wanted to just ask you to stay tuned to the end. I have a little bit longer of an outro tonight with some things in the description box I think you're really going to want to check out. Some people in the Stemma fam in the tribe are doing their own thing on YouTube and with podcasts, and I really want you guys to check it out, support them, promote them, help them grow. So bear with me on the long outro, and please be sure to check out the description box. Here we are with Almost Vanished. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we have another video in our Almost Vanished series. I know you guys love this series as much as I do, so let's just jump right in. I've done a couple of videos on this channel previously about people, both kids and adults, who seemingly vanished without a trace, only to turn up again at some random time and in some random place with truly bizarre tales to tell. This time, I decided to cover these almost vanishings in general instead of labeling the video children or adults. I'm always so fascinated by these tales and recently covered one very popular one in general, which has been given the name Robot Granny or Robot Grandma. If you haven't seen that one yet, maybe go on and check it out after this one. I will try to put a link right up here, somewhere up top there. So anyways, what actually happens to these people? Are they just the imaginings of a child's mind or a traumatized adult who perhaps hit their head or drank some foul water or ate some poisonous berries? I'm sure for the families of the people who thought they were gone forever but were lucky enough to have them back again, it doesn't really matter. But for me, for us in this community, I had to investigate further. There are some common themes and trends to these stories, especially with the children, but nothing solid or concrete where we can definitively say that one thing or another happens every single time, or even most of the time. Despite not really knowing or even ever really being able to figure things out, like to figure out what really happened to these people, and if the tales they tell of the bizarre things they had gone through, witnessed, and encountered throughout their alleged ordeals, I find their stories truly fascinating and wanted to share just a few here today with you. So here it is, the Almost Vanished. Let's start way back in the year 1868 in central Michigan in the United States. A 3-year-old little girl was at a lumber camp with her father where he worked. According to him, she was literally there one minute and gone the next, quote, as if she had blinked right out of existence, end quote. Sound familiar? Because that's what the parents always say. Her terrified father enlisted the help of 2 hunters he knew from the area to help him search the nearby woods for his lost daughter. They roamed the dense forested and wood areas nearby the lumber camp, calling for the girl and repeatedly screaming her name, but it was soon well into the night and they hadn't gotten a single response, and they found no evidence at all of not only where she had gone, but if she had ever even really been there at all. Finally, it was too dark to search for the little girl anymore, and the search had to be called off until dawn the following morning. The next day, more hunters joined the father in his now completely panicked and frantic search for his little girl. As they trudged through this harsh and dense forest, they claimed to have heard the little girl shouting from somewhere nearby. She was responding to hearing her name being shouted. They say that they followed the sound of the little girl's shouts and were facing some really rough and treacherous terrain as they followed the sound of her voice. They reported later that even though they could hear the little girl and figured she would be close enough if she was hearing them shouting for her and they were hearing her, it seemed her yells back to them were much further away. It was almost as though she were yelling through some kind of blanket or perhaps a veil of some sort and wasn't really fully there in the forest with them. This is also an extremely common theme throughout these almost vanished stories. They followed the sound of her shouts to a nearby river and literally had to use knives and weapons to fight their way through the brush and vegetation just to get to her. Suddenly, they heard a large splash, and when they turned to see what could have made such a sound, they saw an enormous black shape, which they took to be a bear, entering the water and seemingly trying to escape to the other side of the woods to get away from them, to flee. This animal moved very swiftly and efficiently and disappeared into the woods before they could even register what was actually going on. What were they seeing? This is when they noticed the little girl. She was standing right there, very still, atop a nearby log, and she was missing most of her clothing, including her shoes. Sound familiar? The little girl was finally rescued, and I can't even imagine the relief that washed over her parents and the hunters involved in the search who eventually found her. However, when asked what had happened to her, she claimed that the large animal the hunters had seen was what she had named, quote, Mr. Wolf, end quote, and that Mr. Wolf had been keeping her prisoner there by that log in the middle of the river on the outskirts of that rugged and impossibly rough terrain. She never would have gotten through that by herself, let alone with no scratches or anything on her. I want you guys to think about this for a minute because it's what struck me first. These grown men who were hunters in 1868 had to use weapons and knives to get through some of the area around where they found her. So how in the world did she get through it unharmed or even at all? Moving on, she claimed that Mr. Wolf had eaten her hat, taken her shoes, and was adamant that she couldn't and never would be able to leave, despite how much she cried, pleaded, and begged to be able to go home. She was told she could leave, quote, under no circumstances, end of quote. He did, however, provide the little girl with water and berries to eat to keep her fed. It's impossible to tell, especially with so much time passed now here in 2021, what really happened here. These men were hunters and fully knew the difference between a bear and a wolf. However, they went on to state that they didn't actually know for a fact if what they had seen had been a bear, just that's what it looked the most like, and they admitted that maybe their minds were filling in some of the details just to make it make more sense. They were sure of one thing, though. It couldn't have been a wolf. It was unlike anything they had ever seen and far too large, not the right body shape. Does that make sense? So what was this thing that this little frightened girl described as Mr. Wolf? Was it indeed a wolf? Was it a bear? Or was it something else altogether? What did it want? What were its intentions with the little girl, and why had it kept her fed? We will most likely never know the answers to any of these questions, and honestly, there's many more questions than answers in most of these cases. Pretty much all of them. And I personally believe, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but I believe that this was possibly a fae creature who fed her enchanted berries. Not sure though, and I'll go more into that when I do the episode of Missing in the Fae 4 for my channel, which is going to be different than the one on Missing Persons and Mysteries. Anyway, ironically though, this isn't the only story like this out there. There are many tales of young children going missing in the woods and being found somewhere they should never have been able to get to by themselves, and after being found, claiming an animal had abducted them and or cared for them. It happened again in July of 1955 when a 2-year-old little girl named Ida Mae Curtis went missing under eerily similar circumstances. She was in a lumber camp in Kootenai National Forest in Montana. Ida's frantic mother had called the authorities and in a state of complete panic and terror told them how she had seen a bear grab up her daughter and carry her into the forest. She said the animal was, quote, cradling the little girl as it ran off and disappeared into the dense woods with her. There was a very large search and rescue effort, especially for the time, and 350 people scoured and searched every single square inch of that forest they possibly could for 2 entire days. This was when Ida was found safe only about 300 yards from where she had originally gone missing or, quote, been carried off, end quote, in a kind of makeshift and raggedy looking shelter, sort of. She would later go on to tell anyone who would listen how she had been fed and cared for by the large bear who her mother had seen originally carrying her off. Authorities thought that the little girl had just been through some kind of ordeal, and also that the mother had to have been mistaken about seeing the bear abducting her daughter. Ida and her family, however, have always insisted that what Ida said was absolutely 100% true. Let me stop right there for a minute. Even if a giant bear came down out of the woods and snatched up a 2-year-old toddler, bears don't even cradle their own cubs, let alone they're going to cradle a human child. I think a bear would be more likely to rip the child apart very quickly. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it possible a bear actually went out of its way to feed and care for a human child? Could one or would one kidnap a human child and cradle it as though it were an infant human? These cases really creep me out. How would we ever know? And honestly, it's more like, what the hell is going on here with all of these reports of these animals kidnapping and then caring for random children right in front of their parents, too? This phenomenon makes me absolutely terrified to take my son camping or fishing or something. On August 25th, 1898, 3-year-old Alice Rachel Peck was attempting to follow her mother and wandered away from home. Her mother had been picking berries nearby, and little Alice wanted to help. Picking berries. Surprise, someone goes missing. Her mother had no idea the toddler was behind her and trying to catch up. The little girl inevitably lost sight of her mother and got lost. The massive search was launched to try and find the missing girl that would stretch out for 3 days without any trace of her ever turning up. Then, on August 28th, she was found safe and in good health about 5 miles from where she had originally vanished. When she was first found, it's reported that the little girl was, quote, in a sort of a trance, end quote, but eventually and soon after being found, she was able to remember wandering off barefoot along an abandoned road in an attempt to try and follow along with her mother to the nearby berry bushes in the woods by their house. This was a bit odd right from the start, as little Alice had been wearing shoes when she had wandered off, and a bonnet as well, which was also missing when she was found. She claimed to have survived by eating some berries. When asked how she managed to overcome the series of steep drops and boulders that stood in the way of where she had gone missing and where she had been found, she gave the cryptic response, quote, "The black man helped me," end quote, who she claimed had guided her and carried her over obstacles, notably away from where she had disappeared. Who or what was this black man, and why was he or it helping Alice, as she put it anyway? Really, it seems whatever or whoever this was actually carrying her further and further away from her home and not trying to communicate with her and try to get her back to her parents' home safely, despite, at least if it were a human, which I think is highly unlikely, having to have heard and seen all of the search and rescue efforts being made to locate the young girl. This was a huge search back for that time. 1898, 350 plus people. That was unheard of. Again, we probably won't ever know the truth or receive closure with the answers to these questions. Imagine how the people involved feel about that. It must be absolutely terrifying, to say the least, and to put it mildly. Around the very same time as little Alice Rachel Peck had gone missing, it was reported in the American Ethnology Report of 1898 that another child had gone missing under strangely similar circumstances. And this story, wow. The report talks about a 10-year-old boy who was only called Wofford and how he was practicing archery by a river in some dense woods near his house. He said he was distracted, though, by the thought of doing some fishing and decided to go even further into the woods to the river where he could catch some fish for his mom to cook that night for supper. He was attempting to make a fish trap out of some nearby stones when suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere, in the blink of an eye, a man emerged from the woods and approached him. This stranger told him that he looked tired and like he could use a break. He invited young Wofford to dinner at his house, being only 10 years old, and also because this mysterious stranger seemed perfectly normal and ordinary in every other way besides he had randomly showed up out of nowhere and was inviting a young boy to his home for dinner. I doubt a 10-year-old would have even put together how strange and not right all of this was. You know what I mean? So despite all this, the boy accepted his invitation. He followed this man to a nearby house and went inside. He claimed the house was well kept and brightly lit with more food than he had ever seen before and filled with music and singing and laughter. He said any fears he may have had completely went away when a family friend he had known his whole life, so a friend of his mom and dad's, had also shown up at the house and ate and danced and drank right along with everyone else. Wofford ate a huge dinner and dessert, played with the family's children who were all around his own age, and, after having what he described as a most entertaining time, ended up falling asleep for the night. So now he's sleeping at this strange man's house. Stranger danger! I guess that didn't exist back then. So obviously he was incredibly comfortable, right? In the morning, he told the family he had to be going because his family was probably frantic with worry and wondering what had happened to him. He had just went out to practice archery and possibly fish, and he's gone for the entire day. It was at this point the strange man who had hosted him the night before took him out along a path which reportedly had an orchard on one side and a cornfield on the other. The stranger took him to a junction in the path and pointed along another trail that meandered off into the wilds, explaining that it would take him towards the river, over a ridge, and straight home. The boy followed the instructions, but when he turned around to wave goodbye to the stranger, he saw that not only was he gone, but also that the cornfield and orchard that had just been there were nowhere to be seen either. Indeed, and in fact, there was no trail at all. He found himself surrounded by nothing but thick trees and wilderness all around him and had no idea where he was. Luckily, as he made his way through the underbrush, he managed to chance upon a group of people who had been out frantically searching for him, including that family friend who he had apparently seen at the stranger's house. When Wofford asked the friend where the house was and what had happened to the trail, the friend explained that he had never been to such a house and had been out searching for him, for Wofford, the entire night before. Indeed, later on and all throughout his life, he would be told by the locals and everyone he knew that there was no house at all where he claimed it to have been. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely think this one is either a Fae encounter or some kind of dimensional switch, because some kind of glitch in the matrix type thing, because he turned around to look and it was completely gone. Why would a friendly Fae person or a friendly being of any kind lead him out into the woods to get lost, though? That's the only thing. Like, it was friendly, everything was all good, you know, he had a great night, the guy was helpful and nice and again friendly, but then the kid gets lost because everywhere he told him to go was pretty much gone. Is it something like he looked back, something like a Babylon thing? I don't know, guys. I'm searching, racking my brain. I heard this story years ago, forgot all about it, and it really affected me, like, because it reminds me of an encounter that I had with the Fae, which I will tell in my personal encounters eventually. Although I wonder if Wofford was approached at any point in his life after this by some other stranger asking him for help with something. Fairies almost never give out their hospitality like this unless they know the person is someone they'll need for something further on down the line. The superstitious locals, upon hearing the story, suggested that he had probably come across the shape-shifting Nunahi, meaning the people who live anywhere, which are supposedly a race of supernatural creatures from Cherokee mythology. It's hard to know just what to make of this story. What do you all think? Guys, please be sure and give this video a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. And even if you are subscribed, check that notification bell, please. Spread the love by sharing this video. Please do me a favor and check out the description box. There's going to be a few new things in there this week, along with everything I normally have. So Justice for Caleb Smith. We're hoping to have April on sometime soon, maybe in a month or two on the Sunday night show. Give her an hour or two to explain any updates, anything new going on in the case. But for now, if you're not familiar with it, you can check out the first interview down there in the description box. Also, links for Sunday night's Fireside Chat / Fall Talk with Stemma over on Missing Persons and Mysteries, and the times and informations will be down there as well. Also, my Wednesday night live oracle readings right here on this channel, information on Campfire Stories every Friday night on Missing Person and Mysteries. Also, our friend Dylan from Crwepy Unsolved, Dylan and Sabrina, I should say, they have a YouTube channel now. And I was recently on there talking about shadow people, random scratches, telling the Demon Claire story, talking about the Fae, all kinds of good stuff. You know we love Dylan and Sabrina. We want to promote other channels in our network. So I'm going to put a link to that down below. And also, I'm going to put a link for something Dylan is doing where you can call in and tell your listener encounter to kind of like a voicemail service, and he'll play it on the air. I'll give you the email address so you can contact him about it if you want to, or I'll just put the link to the voicemail that he gave me and you can check that out. I know this is a lot, but bear with me. Also, our good friend from Friday night Campfire Stories panel, Laura Elizabeth, started her own podcast, Midnight in the Mountains. I'm going to put a link for one of those episodes down there too. Check it out. Go on over and sub. Check out her podcast. All of her stuff is on YouTube under Crwepy Unsolved, so that information is in there as well. PayPal and Patreon links for donations to the channel. My Amazon wish list link, as many of you have asked for in the past. I've finally been putting it in there. I'm also going to put a link to my book, Missing the Fae Theory by Gemma Jade, the Amazon link for the Kindle and the paperback. Thank you so much to everyone who already bought it. Thank you so much to everyone who's leaving me 5-star reviews and ratings. If you want a signed copy and you already bought a book, email me. My email will be on the screen here and also in the description box. If you have any encounters with the supernatural and or paranormal, please email me at gemmajadeparanormal@gmail.com and I will put it in my listener encounters series. If you want a free intuitive oracle reading from me, or if you have any other correspondence or any other questions, you can email me again at gemmajadeparanormal@gmail.com. Sorry, this is a lot of information to get out and I don't want to give you guys like a 5-minute exit. So I'm pretty sure I covered everything. Oh, my interview on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Thanks for bearing with me to the very end. Please check out Dylan and Sabrina and our Laura. They're a part of the Missing Persons and Mysteries 13 Past Midnight Gemma Jade brand network, and you guys are really going to love it. Check out my interview. We all love Dylan. He does the editing, helps out with the editing for Missing Persons and Mysteries. Steve narrates, I write. So give them a chance, guys, and also share as much as you can of their stuff. It would be really cool. I'm going to actually use the link to call in and leave some encounter voicemails for Dylan of stuff that I've never told anyone. Dylan has this personality where I just always want to tell him new experiences that I've never recounted yet. So if you're waiting for a signed book for me, be patient. USPS told me that they are running at a snail's pace, which is funny because it's called snail mail. Guys, be kind to each other, but also be kind to yourselves. It costs nothing to be a good, kind, nice, decent person. Stay humble. Smile at a stranger. Always go in grace. Have your best day. Have your best night. And I will see you next time. Mwah. Bye-bye.